So 8:30 p.m. sharp. Just started. Like I said, previous times I'm like a Swiss clock, just set to start on the specified time. So I'm happy to see you tonight. Do not know who's connected. Just checking quickly who's online tonight, who's with us tonight. I think that not everybody will be here, and probably it's always for good reasons. You've got something else to do, some other commitments. So hi Hamdan, nice to see you tonight. I'm very happy to see you. Good evening. How have you been? So I am really happy to see you. So good. And I hope that for your aunt things are being in place and going well. All good. Hi, Fuad Peter. Nice to see you. How have you been? So no reactions. Okay, so likewise waiting and anticipating, yeah, of course. So the thesis has now slowly been sent to the panel, to your two reviewers, and as I explained previously, you will receive the two reports between 4 and 6 weeks. You will receive the reports, and the reports can give you four possible outcomes for now. The first one is that the thesis is accepted as such for immediate defense. I would not say really, but this is not the most common decision a panel makes. And usually when I supervise DBA students, I'm always trying to make sure that they will be allowed by the panel, that they will be allowed to defend immediately. And that's why I'm always demanding, and it might sound a bit tough or frustrating, as I know that as a student, you, and not you in particular, Fuad Peter, I was the same. You think you're ready, you think you've done a good job, and you do not really understand why your jolly supervisor wants more changes, etc. So what I've always done, and I think Hamdan, you could witness to this. What I'm always doing is that I'm always trying to make sure that the thesis is good to go, and that there will be no unpleasant surprises with reports from reviewers. So this is always my big concern. So the four types of so the other three recommendations reviewers can articulate are major changes, which requires about 6 months to a year of work. Much needs to be redone. It can be the literature review. The worst, and this happened once. The worst is when you have to redo your data collection. And I'll give you examples. Thank you. So, thank you for Peter. So, I do not pretend I was right or you were wrong or whatsoever. No, my thing was my what has always driven me with supervision is that I always want to make sure that the student submits a thesis about which they can be proud enough. So there's nothing worse than having a dissertation which is so-so and about which you cannot be proud in the future. So if you're asked your work, your thesis, if people want to read it, and if you yourself you're not proud about it, then there is a problem. You'll always find a reason or an excuse for not giving the thesis or whatsoever, and it looks bad on you. So yeah, this is a big concern for me, making sure that you will be proud enough on the long term. Plus, like I said, on the short term, that you can go through the viva process without big surprises. And here I can tell you a few stories. So I've supervised a number of theses, and I have rescued a couple of those. One was a student who had as a supervisor the dean at LCU, Lebanese Canadian University, a former partner of GEM, which has been a disaster. So it really has been a disaster for the school. I'm not telling you everything, but it's been terrible. And her supervisor was the dean. At that time, it was possible, and I'm not finished with the four recommendations, right? I'm still with the second one. And at the time, it was possible to file on the viva day, where the panel said no, this thesis is not good enough. It should never have been submitted. Should never have been defended. So this student, she had a thesis which obviously had not been supervised. Her supervisor was really absent, and I was the external examiner, and the convener told me, do not hesitate to be tough. I said, okay, no worries, I'll be myself. And if I'm tough, I'm tough. He said, no, be. Okay, good. And I was the last to speak. And first, the supervisor from LCU said, oh, this is the best thesis I have ever read, ever supervised, etc. I thought I had a heart attack when I heard that. So obviously I never read the thesis. So then I spoke and I said, well, no, this thesis should never have been written this way. This thesis does not meet any of the academic requirements. So it's not, I'm sorry, the student cannot get the degree at all. There is one more year of work. So on the viva day, right? So what happened? The student then took a year to work on the thesis. I had written a long, detailed report with advice, and a year on, the student submits the thesis again with a schedule of responses to reviewers. And here she was saying, well, here you suggested I should change this. So I changed the punctuation in the sentence, which changes the meaning of the sentence and which should please you. So the changes were honestly very cosmetic. It was so annoying. You know, you have the impression when you're the reviewer that you are taken as a fool, you know, as if you were stupid, you know, and this is something you do not like. So I prefer someone telling me, I disagree with your comment, or I could not take your comment on board because but I did something different. I prefer something like this, rather than someone claiming that they have taken my comments on board where they have not. So then, second viva, I was told the same. Hi, new guests. I was told the same, so do not hesitate to be tough if need be. Okay, so it was not difficult being tough, as the thesis again was not meeting the requirements, and my report was still between 6 months and 1 year of work. And then the panel decided, not me, but I accepted. The panel decided that I would replace the supervisor, so I could take the student to viva. I mean, to not just viva, but to graduation. So I accepted, and then I supervised and stuff, and eventually, so she had to redo everything, nearly everything. The literature review, she had to rewrite everything. She had collected data, she had to redo data analysis, etc. And then the thesis was good enough. Not great, honestly, not great, but good enough. And I remember a thing. When she defended, it's just she defended. The day she defended was the day before I got married, and I remember that she was getting married the week after. That's fine, and so here for the third time where it was good enough, she was she was relieved. She was happy it could work. So, but just to say, it's really to make sure that you can go through the viva, and of course, students need to be serious when doing their thesis. I fully agree with you, Hamden, and that's something which too often is underestimated. But also too often, I've noticed that we have students who do not necessarily understand why their supervisors are making certain comments, why supervisors are not always flattering them, or always saying, oh yes, that's good, continue like this. It's always comfortable hearing things that you want to hear. It's always a challenge. It is always taking you out with your comfort zone when you are told things you do not really want to hear. And and this is how I've been supervising, but I hope gently, not violently, always gently. I agree that at times I may have lost a bit of my patience, and I think that some of you might have had this impression that at times I lost my patience. If you noticed that at times it happened, I apologize for this. No, I sincerely do. So this was the second type of response you could receive. The third recommendation is significant changes. Significant meaning 3 to 6 months work. Here, 3 to 6 months work usually means that the student needs to do extra reading and to strengthen the theoretical grounding of the thesis with an extended literature review, a revised theoretical framework, and also discussion and conclusion. That's the third one, and the fourth one is minor changes, which means the thesis can be can be submitted, so it could be defended. Some changes are required, but the revised thesis must be submitted 2 weeks prior to viva. Then, Fuad, is it true that many publications that gain good reputations are actually student doctoral dissertations due to the involvement of the supervisor and panel? Well, yes, it is true. It is true. The thing is that well, many. Let's say that there are several things or several ways of answering your questions, because it's never too systematic, right? But many, yes. When a doctoral student is closely supervised by a supervisory team, and when the student does good work, then of course publications can be derived from the thesis. And when you derive publications from the thesis, there are basically two options. One option is where the student publishes in their own name on their own, and which means they take alone full responsibility for what is published. When you do that just after the thesis, after their doctorate, you do not necessarily have all the codes for publishing. So you do not really know how to approach journals, how to write for a journal, how to interact with reviewers, so with the editor and reviewers, and it is a bit of a wager, I would say. So what very often happens, most of the time, I would say, is that indeed, papers, perhaps I don't know how many papers, if it is just the first one or a couple, have the student name first, and then the supervisor's names next. And not that the supervisor does not know work. No, it's that there are two options, I would say. One option is that it is like a tribute to the supervisor. Oh, thank you very much. So you've been helping me all the way and taking me here, and it's a form of thankfulness. And even if the supervisor says, yes, but I've not done much, you have done the work. And the second thing that more often happens is that the supervisor is then actively involved as a co-author, giving guidance for the paper, giving guidance for publication, plus contributing to the paper itself, rewriting parts, asking questions, etc. And yes, it's true that a number of papers or publications, more generally, including books, are produced this way with the supervisor. Personally, I have noticed a few things. I've noticed a few supervisors who want their names, and they say, I want my name on the paper because I've helped you. Without me, you would never have reached this. I think it's not very fair demanding, when you're a supervisor. And I've seen this with a student of mine. She was supervised by someone else before. She is currently in the process of publishing. And the ex-supervisor says, well, I want my name on this publication as I initiated it. I gave you the idea. Well, my student is not too keen on this idea, but as a matter of politeness, said, okay. Personally, when I encourage students to publish as they want, either in their own name, or if they want me to help, or if they want me to be involved, I'm more than happy to be involved. But it's true that I do not want to sort of give them the impression that I'm stealing their work by just putting my name on something they did. So that's where I am. So if a student says, I would prefer to have publication just in my name, I said, okay, go for it, and I'll help you have your publication anyway. And if they want me to be as a co-author, I'm very honored to be a co-author, and I do my part as much as I can. I'll do my part. I'll contribute. So this is what I can tell you for now in terms of publications, or good publications with supervisors and or reviewers. Something else I can tell is that is about publications with multiple names when you've got more than two. Something that can be helpful for you in the future if you want to publish. It is that there are traditionally two ways of sorting the authors. The authors' names. What is the rule? And there are two possible rules. One rule is, and I do not like this rule, is by alphabetical order. By alphabetical order, I remember once I was writing a paper with a colleague. She did not contribute much at all, and as her name was closer to the beginning of the alphabet, she really said it must be in alphabetical order. I thought, not really fair. But with other colleagues, where we have really an equal contribution, alphabetical order is not a problem at all. And the second rule, the second way of sorting all authors when you've got more than two is by contribution, traditionally by contribution. But by contribution does not mean that the last author did less than the others. It means that the contribution is different, where the first author is always the student, and the third author is nearly always the supervisor. And in between, you've got another author who's joined at some point. Can be a reviewer, it can be another colleague, whoever. And why is it so? The supervisor, so in this order, it means that there's a lead author, so the first one, the student. There is a helper, or another contributor, the second author. And there is the third author who, coached the other co-authors and helped them get published. So coach them and help them craft the paper so it is publishable. And this is how come a number of papers, yes indeed, have the supervisor's name or panel members' names on it as a signature. So does this for now answer your question, Fuad Peter? Knowing that I've got a second part of answer for your question, but does this answer your question for now? Okay, perfect. So I'll continue. And still on the fact that yes, the number of publications are derived from a PhD thesis. And here is why. It's not the rule or something. It's just something I have noticed or understood. It is indeed true that a fair number of papers come from doctoral thesis. That's very true. And this is the case for, let's say, mainly, let's say, one or two reasons, but you will see that you can consider it's one reason or two because both concur with each other. The main reason is that the thesis has been resting on recent, fresh empirical material that the student could collect. And then, indeed, it is easier using freshly collected empirical material than collecting new material. And it's true that when you are working full-time, a full-time academic somewhere, you have less and less time for data collection. It does not mean you no longer do data collection, but when you do, especially qualitative research, you have fewer, say, less and less time. So yes, more papers come from younger scholars, from recently graduated from recent or young doctors. It is very true. And this takes me to something else, which is how come then scholars do not have much time anymore for data collection when they are working full-time. And this is where I would say the the system or academia is a bit perverted or corrupted. Not, you'll see what I mean, not corrupted metaphorically, of course. When you are a scholar, you are assessed on the basis of your academic publications, right? And you must, and this is a requirement coming from accreditors, AACSB, AMBA, EQUIS. So you must publish a certain number of papers within a certain time frame. So this time frame varies. So I cannot tell you a rule which will be different in a year's time or something. But generally, it is two papers with this type of ranking within 2, 3, or 4 years. So you no longer have the luxury when you're an academic to take the time for quality data collection. So it is harder collecting good data as you must publish. So either you publish things where you recycle data you have already collected, or you co-author papers with students of yours or graduates who were your students before. This is, yes, indeed, how come a number of papers are proceeding from doctoral thesis. Does this turn the full circle for you, 𝙤𝙤𝙤𝙤? Hi, Rachel. No problem. No worries. Welcome. Okay. Great. Happy I could answer your your question, 𝙤𝙤𝙤𝙤. So there are other things I was considering addressing tonight. In case the chat is a bit shy, so I do not know if either Hamdan you want to share your experience or whatever, or if Peter, if you have other questions or anything else you'd like to address. If yes, I'm more than happy to continue on this. If not, then I will go ahead with what I had in mind for tonight. It is really up to you. Right, so I thank you. Thank you, Hamden. So, yeah, thank you very much. My pleasure. It was my pleasure. It was very enjoyable for me too. Yeah, it was great. So, for Hamden, I joined the supervision in the middle of the journey. At the beginning, Hamden had one supervisor, and then I think communication was not great between you and your supervisor, and then she asked me if I could mediate and if I could join and mediate the supervision. So in the first place, when I joined, I said, "Oh yes, with great pleasure," as she was a friend of mine and I was more than happy to help. And yes, I was the second supervisor. And then at some point she got sick, and as she got sick, she withdrew from all her commitments, and I took over some other of her commitments, and then when she returned from sick leave after a long while, she no longer wanted to be involved in her prior commitments. And so that indeed for you, Hamden, I ended up being the supervisor, where I started as the mediator and co-supervisor. And yeah, so it's true, you're highlighting the fact that I'm responding quickly. Well, I'm happy you feel you were lucky. So I was very pleased. To work with you. And so something is very true, that I'm always trying to respond quickly to students, which I learned not many colleagues do. And here is my view on this. My view is that if you receive a message from a student asking feedback, this means the student needs feedback to progress. And if until there is feedback, the student will be anxious and stressed, either because they do not know if they're doing well, and then two things might happen. Either they wait until your feedback arrives, and when your feedback arrives, it might be so close to the deadline that they will not have enough time to do a good job, or they will take initiatives without knowing if they're going the right direction. And if not, then it might be stressful for them to redo the work, to undo what they did and redo. Therefore, I've always tried to respond to students between 1 and 24 hours. I've always tried to be quick. At times it was a bit slower, but most of the time this is what I've been trying to do for that reason, and make sure that students are not on hold for too long. Yeah, this is my style. So emails from students are priority number 1 when I'm working, if I receive an email from a student, I interrupt my task, except if I'm on a meeting or if I'm teaching, but I interrupt my task, read the email, and then either my task can wait and then I respond. So I read the email, I read the document sent by the student, and then I respond, or I just complete my task and next read the document sent by the student and send my response. So this is what I always do. This is it is important to me that indeed students are not on hold for too long. Yeah, and so and I like doing it. So it's no effort for me. It's no effort. So like I said, like I was saying earlier, so for tonight I was thinking of something which could be helpful for those who are either starting with a dissertation or finishing and close to viva. I know it may sound weird, that what I'm considering sharing tonight could work in both instances, the very beginning or the very end. I would say for the very beginning, where it can be helpful is that it can help you, what I'd like to share with you, can help you frame your work and frame the direction you will take or you will give your dissertation. And conversely, when you are close to the end or at the end, close to viva, it might help you frame your possible responses to reviewers or to the panel on the day. So it might help you have a synthesis view of your work, of your thesis. And I think, this is it. And this is something I'm always telling my students when they start with me. And if there's any of you who really started the thesis with me and not someone I supervised down the track, you will probably or hopefully be able to confirm. So actually, I've got an anecdote that will feed this. I think I said this last week. I remember I mentioned it last week. I mentioned that I had this secret or this tip that we'll share with you on my own viva day. On that day, I was collecting one of my reviewers at the airport, Paris Charles de Gaulle. He was coming from Manchester, and when we were on the train from the airport to the university, he told me, so we were just conversing, and he told me, it's not difficult having a very good thesis and a very good paper. I said, okay, tell me more. He said, okay, you should be able to answer 4 questions. And those 4 questions, I will develop them for you. But those 4 questions are, what is my knowledge claim? What is the knowledge debate addressed in this thesis or in this paper? By which means will I meet my knowledge claim and address this debate? And what is my expected contribution, or what is my contribution if I'm at the end? Simple, he said. And as I thought to myself, I wish I knew from before. So now I'd like to give you more insights into each of those 4 questions, because this is where it's I would say important, or where it could be useful at least. So first, the knowledge claim is, I would say, 2 things. Sorry, the knowledge claim is sort of two things. It is basically the research question you want to ask in the thesis. And the question you're asking to fill a gap you observe somewhere. So I have already mentioned the research question in previous streams, but just a few words. I'm getting back to it a bit, which is that indeed your research question must end up with a question mark. So it is a question. You're not here to prove something. You're not here to demonstrate something. No, you're here to answer a question. And your question, in the way it is worded, should not give any prejudice of the potential answer. So the answer must, can be counterintuitive, can be surprising. We should just not be able to tell in the first place what the answer will be. If you can tell what the answer is even before you start, it means it is not a research question. It's not a knowledge claim per se, as there is no room for uncertainty, no room for surprise. So likewise, as I mentioned in previous streams, the research question must read simple. It must be brief, expressed in simple words, and still have the main concept that drive the work. But the simpler, the briefer, the better. That's the first part of this knowledge claim, the research question. But then, I'm telling you something now. Please do not take me wrong. I will not contradict myself with what is coming. The second part of the knowledge claim is based on the question you're asking, based on the current knowledge you have of the topic, through your readings, through some, let's say, preliminary data collection or whatsoever. What is your intuition of a possible answer to this question? And here I insist, intuitions, but informed intuitions. Not, just my gut feeling is. No, gut feeling is not enough. Or everybody knows. No, not everybody knows. So, what is your... Yes. How do you think a possible answer to this question could be? And why do you think it could be this? Some people would call this hypothesis. So research hypothesis you want to test, or research propositions you will study more in depth. Why not? But I think it might be confusing. Speaking of hypothesis or propositions, I prefer here speaking of your intuitions. When you have an intuition, you are following it or not, but it is not. It's not an end per se. If it is an intuition, you want to see if this intuition is correct or not. If you articulate hypothesis or if you articulate propositions, it is something which is more recent than just intuitions. So here, the knowledge claim is, what is the question I'm asking, and what is my intuition of a possible and reasonable answer to that question? That's the first thing. Then the second One is on the knowledge debate. So what is the knowledge debate I want to address? So here, of course, you do not approach this second question in the same way, whether you are starting with your work, with the thesis, or whether you are finishing. So when you are finishing, I'm starting with this because it is sort of easier to address. When you're finishing, well, you have browsed, you've read the literature already. So you supposedly know what the literature is about, where the gap is, etc. When you start, it's a bit more difficult, and that's why I'll get back to it later. So when you finish, the knowledge debate is actually is more than just the gap in the literature. You will always hear people telling you, oh, yes, to have a good thesis, you find a gap and you fill it. Okay, and how do I do it? That's the very question, right? So how do I do it? So here, you are as clear as possible with the debate. The debate means that you should be capable of identifying what, so in recent and current debates, so in current research, sorry. I'm not explaining a debate by using the same words. So, in current research, what is known, what is still unknown, but then also on what is known, where are there, so what are the, on what do researchers agree and on what do researchers disagree? And then where the debate is really where researchers do not agree. And as researchers do not agree, at some point you will have to take on a position. So there is a debate, and in a debate you cannot just be an observer. You must at some point take on a position. And I apologize because when I say this, some who know me very well might think, oh, it's very hypocritical from you saying this. Because it is true that in debates for a long time, I have always preferred not taking on a position. I have always preferred being the referee, you know, like as in sports. I do not like playing football or soccer. I prefer being the referee. So do you have to take a position? No, I'm just sort of actively observing. So people who've known me for a long time would say, yes, you're not the fairest person to say that the student must take a position within the debate. But actually, yes, you do. So this implies that you must be able to identify the main streams of thought on the topic and how they position themselves vis-a-vis each other, and with which one you feel some intellectual acquaintances, and with which one you would like to engage in a conversation. And here is how you identify the knowledge debate. That's very, very important that you be clear with this. But this also implies, and it's very important, this also implies that you must be clear with the most recent research. If you engage in a debate which is no longer a debate, then it cannot be a good thesis. It means the thesis is addressing a dated thing. And here I can give you examples, and I know that I'm always giving the same ones, and I apologize for this, but I think they are very helpful. About 20 years ago, when research on CSR really started, there was a big question, and it was a debate as to whether going for sustainable practices, sustainable corporate and sustainable responsible corporate practices was only for wealthy companies and wealthy countries, or was it, which means costly, or was it really beneficial, economically beneficial? At that time, it was a question, and there were researchers disagreeing 20 years ago. Nowadays, in 2025, when you deal with CSR, it is not a question anymore as to whether it is a matter of rich companies or countries, or whether everybody could do it. Not just should. I'm not speaking of morals. I'm just speaking of the economic dimension of it. So someone who would like to address this as a debate would, I'm sure, rest upon old and dated references and miss what is going on nowadays. So make sure that this debate is fed with recent references. Recent does not mean a reference from last week. No, references from the past couple of years, not the past couple of decades. And back to CSR nowadays. Issues relating to CSR are on CSR reports, standards. So is it possible to set standards for CSR reporting so that we bring some order into those reports, and we can compare, and we can make sure that they are fair on what the organization is eventually doing. This is a debate from now. So could we, should we? Some people would say, oh yes, we must, and things like the GRI are suggesting this. Others could say no, because it's contingent upon the company's core business and activities, and it differs from one company to another. So no, we should not, we could not. So there is a real debate. And then at some point, you should be able to identify with whom you agree, which does not mean that someone is right or wrong, but at least you will identify with whom you can engage in a conversation. This is when you're close to the end. And why is it important when you're close to the end? Because you can more easily engage with your panel when they ask you more about the literature, more about those discussions, more about the gap you would like to fill, more about this need for something different. And this means you have a fair understanding of those discussions, those ongoing and current discussions. So this is when you are close to the end. But when you are just started, like I said, it's probably trickier. It is trickier because precisely you've not done much reading yet. So knowing or being clear with what is known, what needs knowing, not an easy task when you just started, and I fully agree with you. Being clear with this, with which researchers agree or disagree, is not an easy task either. So when you get started, this is usually the part which is the least developed, the least advanced. But at least you know that this is something or somewhere where you will need to put special effort, really. So I'm not detailing tonight the literature review. I would like to devote a full, or perhaps more than one, live stream on the literature review. More specifically, because the literature review has a number of extensions or implications that I'm not really willing to develop tonight. So I keep track of these 4 questions, and now we are coming to question 3. Question 3 is on the means deployed. By which means will I answer the question? By which means will I engage in this debate? And those means are threefold. You've got theoretical, empirical, methodological. This means theoretical means are would be the theoretical framework you will employ, and this theoretical framework, something very important, especially when you are by the end, is that the theoretical framework must, it's not a should, it's a must, proceed from the literature to which you want to contribute. So the theoretical framework cannot be something that comes out of the blue just because you like it, or because you've come across it and thought, interesting, or because your supervisor told you you should use this framework. No, a framework is a way of setting boundaries to your study. And those boundaries should make sense to those researchers you have read and with whom you want to engage in a conversation. And here, if you are dealing with, if your literature is mainly agency theory, and very mainstream neoclassical macroeconomics, your theoretical framework cannot come from a different tradition, because it does not make any sense to those people. It's not consistent, not compatible. But conversely, if in your literature review you were dealing with what we call critical studies, critical frameworks, which are critical of neoclassical macroeconomics, then you cannot, as a theoretical means, have agency theory or any other neoclassical macroeconomic theory. Not compatible, not consistent, not making sense to each other. So it is derived from your literature. And this theoretical means is here really to help you read your empirics, test your research intuitions, and have a boundary objects. The theoretical framework, so the theoretical means, will be here to suggest what falls within your remit, so what needs to be studied, what should be left aside the study. So that the theoretical means is here to help the reader understand the same things as you. When you start with your thesis, you might have, not obliged, but you might have an idea of a possible theoretical means, a possible theoretical framework. If you do, it is probably because you studied it before in your master's, or because someone suggested you that it could be a good thing, but probably not because you have good grounds for it. Not yet. So when you get started, it can help. For instance, I'll take my own example. For my PhD, when I started, I had read all of Foucault. I had read, I would not say all of it, but most of critical management research dealing with Foucault, Michel Foucault. And I had read everything except one thing Foucault had written. And I was convinced that, indeed, Michel Foucault's power-knowledge relationship was key to understanding accountability issues. I was convinced of this, but not necessarily Discipline and Punish, which is the most known piece he wrote. No, it was more subtle, I would say. There was the History of Sexuality, there was the History of Madness in the Classical Age, there was the Archaeology of Knowledge. So all this, and I was convinced that indeed Foucault would be my framework. And my supervisor, who loved Foucault, who wrote a lot about Foucault, asked me, but why? I said, well, why are you asking me this question? You write about Foucault, so you should know. He said, no, I don't know why you need it. I said, okay, but I've read all those. It's compatible with my literature review. He said, yes, but is your literature review compatible with your topic? Okay, fair enough. So at the end of the day, in my thesis, my theoretical framework was strongly borrowed from Emmanuel Levinas on the ontology of being and not being. So with insights from his Talmudic lessons, from the scriptures, from the Holy Scriptures, and what makes a human being, etc. So it was not Foucault anymore, actually. So just to say, when you get started, you might have an idea. Just be clear with the fact that this idea might not be what you eventually do. And if it changes over time, it does not matter. It is not a problem. I would even say that it is healthy. Another example, not just mine, but a student of mine I am supervising, started a year ago with the idea or the impression that she would do actor network theory. Everything was in place for actor network theory, the readings, the intended fields. But then after she started, she realized that actor network theory would not apply to her case. So she shifted towards practice theory, thinking practice theory here is what I really need. So it's very different, but it does not matter. This is life. This is academic life. So you start with an idea and you should accept the idea that you are not married to it, that you're not stuck with it, that your initial intuition of a possible theoretical means might not be the eventual one. It's just a help for a kickoff. So it is really important that you have this in mind. When you are at the end of the thesis, the theoretical means will be the theoretical framework you have eventually employed and which you can justify. When you get started, it is a start, a kickoff. First intuition, first idea, subject to change. And if it changes, it does not matter. I would say it is intellectually healthy. Then comes the means deployed, the empirical means deployed. Here, I would agree with you if you tell me that it sounds pompous. Indeed, it does a bit, I must say. It sounds a wee bit pompous, but it means, so it was just here to mean the empirical data you need. But when I speak of empirical means, by which empirical means, it is a way of feeding this idea of theoretical means as well. So we are operating at the same level. The theoretical framework, the empirical data feed each other and are equally important. They play a different role, but they are equally important to the thesis. So the empirical means deployed can be quantitative or qualitative. So you all know this already, so I'm just refreshing your mind a wee bit with quantitative. So it's a numerical data that can be gathered from databases, from the internet, from questionnaires, surveys, or whatever, or even lab experiments that are aimed at generating data. Your empirical means can also be non-numerical, qualitative, through interviews, through ethnography, where you observe people, through actions and reports, through archives and various documents. And here I can give you a couple of examples. I had years ago a student who wanted to study how the email can be used as a management tool. And for this, she got access to all emails exchanged between a manager and his subordinates for a year. And she took this as non-numerical, so textual empirical data. And this was her empirical means. And the thesis was just brilliant. I also mentioned on a few occasions a student of mine in Brisbane about 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, perhaps 15 years ago, who was dealing with the civil war in Sri Lanka, and she decided to see how international mainstream media had covered the civil war in Sri Lanka. And this was her empirical means, so empirical data. And I also mentioned someone who was the CFO of a football club in Brazil and dealt with communication on Twitter, so posts plus engagements or interactions between the club and their fans, etc. All this was non-numerical, textual data. So textual means deployed. And the third means will be methodological means. Methodological at two levels. The first level, methodology for collecting data. How do you collect your data? How do you think you can collect your data? How can you make sure your data is available, accessible, and affordable? And how will you get it? The second level is treatment. How will you process your data? And when you finish with the thesis, of course, you must be very clear with how you have done all this. But when you get started, you must have an intuition of what you are likely to be able to do in your thesis. So this means you must start thinking of the type of data you want or you need, and how you can collect it and how you can process it afterwards. This means in I do not say in a thesis, and I do not know if the person if you're still here or not, and if you are, do not know if you want to be recognized or not. So I'm not naming you, but a thesis, a very good thesis on the impact of Islamic work ethics on job satisfaction in the public sector was based on a survey, with a questionnaire, and what was very interesting was that the student studied the correlations between responses so as to identify typical profiles of Islamic work ethics in real life, not just client but lived and experienced. And in the methodology, so he knew that he would do statistical tests, but at this stage I did not need to know all the tests that were needed. But for what purpose? For what purpose? All that, so a certain number of tests. And this was done very well. It was very, very clear. When you get started, this is what should guide you. When you're finishing, you should be able to justify why you did this way, this particular way. And then the fourth question is what is my contribution? And here the contribution is potentially threefold. So you can have, well, very often students consider very easily an empirical contribution. Like, I'm dealing with this country, I'm dealing with this company, and it's interesting in itself. It is a contribution. Okay. Admittedly, maybe it is interesting. I do not disagree. But it is not scientifically interesting in itself. It is scientifically interesting because it serves a broader purpose. This is what we must have in mind. And when you get started, too often, you think that your case, the case you want to study, the country, the context, is interesting in itself and will be your main contribution. No, it will not be your main contribution. No, your contribution will be bigger than this. And here, I'm often taking the same examples. But when you consider a thesis which was on corporate governance disclosure and family businesses in Lebanon, I remember that at some point there was a conviction that Lebanon would be the main contribution. I thought, no, Lebanon is not a contribution in itself. Yes, but it's interesting. But the contribution is bigger. So Lebanon is representative of something else in relation to your topic, such as corporate governance disclosure, of probably a financial opaque country. And then suddenly there was a contribution on opaque, so financially opaque country, or countries with an opaque financial system. So contributing to the understanding of this. So here we had initially an empirical contribution, which became something else. And I'm coming to this something else soon. When you get started, do not be too confused by believing that the topic is interesting because you are addressing something radically new. No, not necessarily. So something can be radically new, but boring, but done in an unacademic, unreliable way, so there will be no contribution. Likewise, you can address something that is already well documented, but you can have a big contribution on this. So do not take your empirical means for an end and for a contribution. It is just a means, not a contribution in itself. And when you finish, the worst that could happen, the most frustrating and destabilizing thing that could happen is if you have the question, okay, so what? But I've told you, so what? Here is blah, 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 my work. Okay, but so what? Okay, you've told us a nice story, there is nice empirical evidence, but what should we retain from this? So this is the worst that happens when you are told this. And I can tell you this happens to many. This happens a lot. When you start with, even when you're experienced, often you start with a paper with something, you are enthusiastic, but then you have this rough and tough say what question. And you think, oh my gosh, I have over-invested, overestimated the weight of my empirical means. And I've forgotten that it should just be means and not a contribution per se. So be cautious with this, both when you start and when you finish. Then the second type of contribution is the one, and sorry, I said there are three, but you say there's a fourth one actually. The second type of contribution is the main one, a theoretical contribution. You remember, you address a knowledge debate. So you come here to feed this debate with something interesting, something other people in this discussion could use to advance knowledge and to advance the debate, so that your contribution must be a contribution to theory, a contribution to the understanding of the phenomenon you are studying, a contribution to theory enabling to better understand the topic and the research question. That's it, really. But your contribution to theory does not need to be something totally revolutionary. You're not expected to reinvent the wheel, to reinvent the law of gravity, no, or of relativity or whatsoever. No, you're here at least to be able to tell, okay, I wish to contribute to this feed in this way. When you start, when you're done, my study has revealed this, contributing to that theory in this particular way. Here is how I can add up to this theory. And your addition to theory does not need to be huge. We are, each of us, building a new brick to this construction. So it is a collective piece of work, construction work, and each of us brings one brick. And your brick does not need to be big, but you must be clear with its boundaries, so how big it is. And nobody will blame you for a contribution which is a small one. But you'll be blamed if you claim a major contribution while it is actually not major, not big. It does not matter if it is not big. What matters is that you help us make progress. So this is the second type of contribution. The third type of contribution is methodological. Methodological contribution, you cannot really claim it when you start with your thesis because you do not know. It is something you more tend to observe at the end. And here, for methodological contributions, it means that you have either developed an original, unique and replicable methodological protocol for your research, or that you have imported a research protocol from a different discipline, which is radically new to yours, or that you have enriched an existing protocol with something new. So this is a methodological contribution. And here I'll give you a few examples, of course. I had a student who did a thesis on the reliance paradigm in it's like corporate governance or accountability. And the reliance paradigm, you probably do not know what it means. When he mentioned this for the first time, it was totally new to me. So the reliance paradigm is actually what makes us trust the information which is disclosed. And how do we relate in the terms link, connect, but also tell this story. And what he did was something incredible. He was the CFO of the Tata Group. Tata that owns Jaguar, that owns Mines, that owns Royal Enfield and other companies. So he was the CFO, and in the US, and he did something incredible. He browsed in a systematic manner judgments from the Supreme Court in the US on reliance, on all variations around the term reliance. First, he did with all judgments, and progressively he collapsed his scope down to more issues relating to economics, so law and economics. And he did something which showed how, and this is where it's very interesting, how all the financial concepts we use now, especially in governance and in disclosure, have been grounded in have been shaped by the Supreme Court, and how they have been justified in the judgments. Because this is what is very interesting for him. It was not just the decision, the final decision, he's right, he's wrong. No, it was the whole process of decision making and justification, and how this justification has evolved over centuries. And where it is a methodological contribution is that nobody before him had done this way in management studies. He brought into management studies the most rigorous methods used in legal studies. This was a big contribution to methodology. And I've got another student who has just received reports from reviewers on her thesis, and she's dealing with burnout on the workplace, and more specifically, she is interested in how manager relations might generate burnout. But what she did methodologically, she brought into management studies methods from art history. So she asked her, and from art history and from psychology, but at the intersection of both. So she asked her informants to draw sketches, to sketch what a bad manager is, what a good manager is, but also their own experience of management, either as a manager or as a managee. And then she interpreted, or she read those sketches as an art historian word and as an art critique word, so with different lens, and those crossed with lens from psychology and from HR. And this was a significantly major contribution to methods, as nobody, to the best of my knowledge, in management studies has done something like this before. So when you start, of course, you might not have any idea of whether you will have a methodological contribution. But when you finish, you should know if you have one. If you do, claim it. If you don't, do not pretend something which you're not eventuating. And the fourth, so this was the second one, sorry. The third one, the third one is this one. The fourth one is more of a, it's a social, societal contribution. This means how can my work contribute to advance discussions or practices in society or in business or wherever. Here, this is the so what question asked not by other researchers, but by someone who is not a researcher and who is perhaps in the first place not interested in your thesis, not directly interested. So you need to say, okay, and my thesis might have an interest to others because, or here is this other interest. And this means it could be indeed practical, it could be interest for policy making, it could be a contribution to advocacy, contribution to the understanding of something happening in society, or whatever. And here, for a societal contribution, two things from sociology. In the 1990s, there was a sociological study, a paper, which made a radical contribution to medicine. Yeah, you'll be surprised. You might be surprised, but a major contribution to medicine. In the 1990s, if you remember, the big concern was AIDS, right? So HIV. And those sociologists had studied the sexual behaviors within the gay community, and they could understand how the virus spread. And through their study, they could articulate some observations that were very useful for policy making in terms of prevention. And after this paper was published, then prevention campaigns could start. So prevention against the virus, against the HIV, against AIDS could start. Big contribution. Another paper was on the winners of the national lottery, and this, no, it was not a paper, sorry, it was a book by sociologists, and they found that the winners at the lottery were left on their own and had no idea whatsoever how to use money. What happens when you become rich suddenly? And they found that most of those winners then had strong depression. So you'll be surprised. They were not happy, they were depressed. And their life became a nightmare. And they found that, or they observed that there was a need for psychological support for winners, and also financial advising for winners, not in terms of how to invest, but how to spend your money or not spend your money. And with this book, they have triggered a policy that started in France and which you can find in many countries now, where indeed the National Lottery has a psychological department and a financial or budgeting department aimed at supporting winners for the first year after they won. So it was a societal contribution. I'm not saying you will always have a contribution, not the biggest contribution, but your thesis must be grounded in organizational, societal concerns and have one contribution to that, whichever it is. Of course, when you get started, you do not know what this contribution is, although very often you hope for the biggest possible contribution to society. But when you are at the end, this is what is interesting. When you're at the end, then you are no longer certain, no longer clear as to what your contribution to society is. And this is, I would say, a proof of maturity, I suppose. But very interesting, isn't it? Seems like a unique method. I would not say that it's you say the method for law, for the thesis on the reliance paradigm. Yes, it was just great. But likewise, the other thesis on burnout, the methods was great. Yeah, and I will probably finish with this for my own talk, for my own talking. Something I always ask new students, students that start with me, is to write those 4 questions and send me a 2-page document, no need to write more, where they try to answer those 4 questions before they do anything else. And then what I'm always telling them is, you will see that we will always continue with those 4 questions, and as you continue, as you progress with the thesis, each section, so each question, will be enriched with new thoughts, with new material, but your thesis will always revolve around those 4 questions. But starts small with 2 pages, not more, so that we can see the consistency of the whole thing even before you start. And we can also see where special effort is needed. If we notice that in places, in some areas, you're not clear, you're hesitating, or you're not comfortable, at least we know it from the beginning. And then it's so much easier getting over this weakness. So this weakness at the beginning does not continue as a weakness. So this is what I really wanted to address for for now, for this time of the year, for both those who are finishing, like you, what Peter. So I hope you have a clear idea of how you can conceive of your own work and present it and insist on those 4 things, plus for those who start, a way of having insights. And here I see Messi Anemia Seal, cheap viewers on streamboo.com. Remove the space. Okay. Okay, so thank you for the insight. I hope I can have my own viewers without buying a community. I'm slowly building one, but thank you for the insights. So yeah, this is what I wanted to share with you for tonight. I do not know if you have any comments or whatsoever. I know that it is late in a number of locations, so unless there's anything you'd like to address, then I can wish you a lovely night and hope to see you next time. Okay, happy if it helps. So I wish you a lovely night, and I hope to see you next time or whenever. Okay, bye to all, and have a lovely night.